Welcome, Kimby, to the Flower Podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I always enjoy interviewing flower farmers, but you have a little different twist on what you do because you guys also grow a lot of vegetables. And as you've transitioned, I just want to learn more about the farm. You're at Millsap Farm, is that correct?
That's correct.
And where is that located?
We're in Springfield, Missouri.
Okay. And so you are the farm manager, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I get the opportunity to hear your story and then also your farm story. So I'd love to hear how you found your way into this world of flowers.
Well, I would say that probably my story and farm story kind of get braided together pretty early. So we'll be able to talk about both of them. But I start with me. I grew up in Delaware actually, and my parents' farm mostly like row crops and that kind of thing. And we always had a big garden. So I was always interested in agriculture. I went to school for that. And then I actually went overseas for a while and then came back. I'm summarizing really fast.
Where did
But
you go? I got to find out where you
uh,
went.
let's see, at that time I went to Thailand.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, it was really fun. I did a little bit of agriculture in Thailand, which I had no idea what I was doing. It was great. I
What
learned a
were
lot.
what were you doing there?
Well, so a little bit of ag was kind of like a project, and then we were working with so like teaching English basically to
Interesting.
some kids, and yeah, it was a lot of different experiences. But yeah, and so then I ended up going after Thailand. I went back to school and got a master's in entomology. So just studying insects and looking at that from like on a uh, like the crop pest issue and that angle. And entomology has a lot of different options, and so, but that's what I was looking at. So what I was more interested in, um, and then another long story of going back overseas. I got married, and then we went to the Middle East for a while and did some non-agriculture things. Learned Arabic, did a little bit of, I mean, I say learned Arabic. I don't really speak any of it anymore because I haven't been doing it. That's been years ago. And then ended up coming back to the States. And my husband teaches English to international students, was his job. And so when we came back to the States, he was looking for some full-time work. We ended up moving to Missouri. We were in Kentucky at the time, but we ended up moving to Missouri, and I had a 2 year old and nothing to do. So I started looking up farms that I could volunteer.
Oh,
And I came across Millsap Farms and tried to get a hold of them. And like another long story is we eventually got hooked up with that and started volunteering a couple of days a week with my 2 year old, doing all sorts of whatever needed to happen on this. We're not an organic farm, but we everything that we grow is we use organic practices, so we're just not certified.
I
But
see.
yeah, and so there's lots of weeding and spinach harvest and other things, building cages for fruit trees or whatever, just all sorts of things to do. And so slowly, so that was January of 2013, pretty much when I started volunteering on the farm. And I just kind of started spending more and more time there. And Curtis and Sarah are the owners of Millsap Farms, and Curtis is the head farmer. And Sarah they have a bunch of kids and they homeschool. So she does mostly that, but she also does all the marketing and she does pizza night stuff, which I can get into later. But so yeah, so I started volunteering and pretty much uh, enjoy being out there. it was a lot of fun. And then Curtis kind of was like, we probably should pay you since you're here all the time.
It's funny how that
So
works. That was awful nice.
yeah, yeah. Well, and he was excited because of my background of entomology and crop stuff that I knew and had. So that was really handy. And I didn't have a lot of practical experience other than my own personal garden with vegetables, but I had the background of university and then also just insects. So that was really handy to have. Um, so yeah, I learned a lot. I was able to, it's slowly one thing led to another. A lot of people were there to help me along and teach me the process of farming and like the yearly, just yearly cycles. And we kind of know that we have seasons and cycles, but there's a lot of things that happen on the farm that if you're only there for 3 months, you're gonna miss like a huge picture of
Right.
what goes on. So, and that's true in vegetables. It's also true in flowers, of course. Um, and so I would say about 2 years later, I don't actually remember when I officially became the farm manager. That just kind of happens. I mean, we did talk about it, but I don't remember exactly. And then even now, like Curtis and I kind of work in a partnership of we're both kind of head farmers and we have different responsibilities and focuses on the farm as far as what we do and what how that works out, who we're working with,
Sure.
and what we're responsible for. But
How big is the farm?
so the ground is 20 acres, but we only really grow on about two.
Hmm.
And I think the last numbers that I saw were about 25,000 feet under plastic. I don't that just means, I mean, we have two high tunnels and a really big greenhouse, and then we have this cool passive solar greenhouse. Um, that's kind of fun, and then a couple what we would call caterpillar tunnels as well. And so there's kind of a lot of different environments in which to work, and all those spaces are like some flowers and some vegetables, and we kind of can mix those up.
Hmm.
So
So I know before we started, I asked kind of like roughly what percentage of like what you grow is flowers versus vegetables. Um, I think you said then it was like roughly 25% flowers.
yeah,
So,
maybe 25 to 30.
yeah.
I don't, but yeah, I would say about 25%.
I know that a lot of these things change also depending on the time of year, and one year's different than the next if you have some crop issues or weather or whatever. But I was just kind of curious to kind of how to base that. So, how long ago did you guys start growing flowers?
Yeah, so that's kind of a fun story. Um, Curtis has always planted zinnias and like marigolds and sunflowers just as part of the crop rotation. It's good. It's fun to look at, and it's good for the bugs and that kind of stuff. So he's always done that. And then one time they were going to farmers market, and this was kind of right as I was showing up or right before, and they just cut some zinnias and brought them to market, and people would be really excited about buying their bunch of zinnias and not very excited about buying the bunch of radishes, even though the radishes were not as expensive as the zinnias. And so Curtis was like, wait, what? You don't want my food? So anyway, so long story short, he'd been thinking a lot about adding flowers, but he hadn't found the right person to kind of do that because it's a whole nother endeavor. It's well, every flower has its own unique requirements, just like vegetables, is that every vegetable kind of has its own unique thing, but he kind of knew those, and so trying to learn a whole new aspect was uh needed the right person to come along to do that. So that was about 2015 is when I was like, I'd be willing to try and do that. And I was kind of excited about doing my own project and learning about my own stuff while still working on the farm. And so that's kind of how that happened. We also had a really good friend of the farm who is a doctor, and she basically said, would like, she always would say that flowers are cheaper than Prozac. And so that was what made, because Curtis was really interested in providing food and growing food for people, and flowers felt like that wasn't a food thing. So what's, not that there's not value, because I think we all understand on the flower podcast that flowers are valuable, but it was something that he struggled with. And then having her say that was like, oh, so we're talking happiness and mental health and joy and those kinds of things, which are just as important as, filling your belly with some food too.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that because I just had this I just did an interview that is actually going to be releasing real soon, and we had that conversation that a lot of times, you kind of like, you don't want to uh, take away from the vegetable growers, but sometimes they view flowers as taking up valuable space. But there is something to be said for mental health. There's not just physical health and keeping our bodies healthy, but mental health,
Yeah.
and flowers definitely push all those buttons. And I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that. I'm gonna have to, that may be a quote we use in social media. Flowers are cheaper than Prozac. So I love that. So you heard it right here, folks. Anyway, thanks, Kimby. Anyway,
Sure.
and so, all right. So he saw the merits in it, and then he heard that. And from there, you're already growing. And I understand that from a pollinator side, from beneficial insect benefits, having the sunflowers, the zinnias, and I don't remember what the other things that they were growing.
Marigolds.
Marigolds, yeah, marigolds are huge. That, I mean, there's obviously already some flower action going on. Um, did did you guys start there because you already were doing it, or then what was the next step, so to speak?
Yeah, so for the summer of 2015 is when I kind of started some more things. So that winter, I kind of went through a seed catalog and picked out some things that I wanted to try, and it was just a trial and error, kind of like figure it out as we go. But having come from the vegetable side of production, we already had all of the structures set up as far as, I knew how to, we soil block on our farm. And so like, I know how to soil block. I knew how to like put stuff in the germination chamber to get things to grow. Like we understood transplanting and spacing and put in intensive growing and all of those kinds of things that are really helpful in flowers. And we already were doing that from a vegetable standpoint. So like the transition into growing flowers was actually really, in some ways, I say easy, but it wasn't necessarily, that might be a misconception, but
It was
it
natural. It was natural
it was
because you're
natural.
all
There
these
you
things you
go.
already knew. Right. I
Right.
totally
It
get it.
was, yeah, it was well supported. All the infrastructure was pretty much there. And so it was then at that point, it was really just, I had to learn, well, what, why is the Lysianthus not germinating, or
Mm,
what does the Celosia need, or what does, like just learning the specifics to like, why is my system that I'm using for vegetables not working for this particular flower? What do I need to do differently? And so a lot of that was, I mean, I did a lot of just growing things and going, oh, I don't like that, or oh, I do, or oh, that's really hard, or maybe I should try that again next year because it didn't work this year, but maybe I just did something wrong. So and it was also really nice having um the vegetable background as well, is that we're already an established like seller. We had a market, so it's something that I could just take vegetable or take the flowers to our farmers market, and just they could just be there on the side. And it's like, even like right away we had a market for them, but then I also had a lot of flexibility in learning how to sell them and how to arrange them, and how, like, it was just all of that stuff was a learning thing that I had
sure.
like the support to do, because our main like bread and butter were vegetables at the time. So which is different than I have a friend right now who's starting a flower farm, and so she's got to start running with her flower farm from nothing, and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't have to do that. So it was nice.
Yeah, because you have all those customers that already come to you for food. Do you guys sell to restaurants, or do you sell to, you have other outlets besides the market?
Yeah, we're actually mainly a CSA farm, so community
Hmm.
supported agriculture, where we sell shares of vegetables from the farm for the season. And so that's kind of our main thing. And we just added a flower bouquet to that, and so people could purchase a flower bouquet if they wanted to. And so that's kind of our main thing. And then we also did farmers market. We have a little bit of a farm stand on our property. It's a self-serve, like come as you can kind of thing. And then we do sell to restaurants. Restaurants probably aren't our main sale, but we do that. It's a significant part.
Hmm.
We also really want our restaurants in Springfield to be using and buying and selling local food. So that's important to us.
Sure. Do any of them partake in the flower segment?
Not right now. They do some edible flowers. We do some edible flowers as well, and so a lot of them really like that.
That's cool. What do
Yeah.
you sell as an edible flower?
Um, we do a lot of pansies and violas and nasturtium, snapdragons, which are
Mm-hmm.
technically edible. I don't really care for them, but bachelor's buttons,
Mm-hmm.
marigolds.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's cool. I know we get questions every now and then about edible flowers. That's why I always like to ask when somebody mentions it. I feel like it's really and it's, I always say, I hate saying this because it's so like duh, but it's like, this whole process for you is so organic, um, and when you have established customers or markets and you're just adding on, I mean, it's almost just added value. I mean, it's like a perfect add-on for what you're doing already. Um,
yeah.
and I feel like a lot of times when flower farmers or vegetable farmers start doing this, they have a few transition types of questions and things, and um, and I know it's sometimes it's a little bit of a battle because you need so much land for this, and then it's one of our past guests, Antonio. He always is like him and his sister fight over this, the battle of the veggies and the flowers, and who wins. And so I always find that funny. Is that something where you guys kind of butt heads a little bit, trying to find space for your stuff, and he needs space for his stuff, and
um, in a good natured kind of teasing way, yes. Um,
well, of
but I
course.
mean, when it comes down to the nitty gritty things, it's not a problem. Curtis and I actually get along really well, so we
Sure.
work together really well. So it all works out. And in some ways, like I was saying, we grow 25% of flowers, but we probably, like sales wise, it's probably higher than that. It's a little complicated because I've mentioned this before, but we basically have some agritourism stuff. So pizza night, which kind of throws all the numbers all over the place. But at least if you're looking at just farmers market, flowers outsell everything else that we sell at market. So it's been interesting.
Wow.
So I don't usually have to fight too hard.
Yeah, I guess not. Well, I definitely want to get into that, but before we do that, I have to ask about pizza night because that you mentioned it earlier, and I was like, "What the heck is pizza night?"
So once a week during May through October, so the nicer months, we host a pizza night on the farm. So we have two wood fired ovens, and we make the pizza on the farm using like we make our own dough, and then whatever vegetables we have that week that need to get used, or sometimes it's fruit or sometimes it's whatever. And a lot of times we'll use the meat is frequently either local grown that we have, or stuff that we've grown ourselves on the farm. And so not that it's not 100% farm raised pizza, but we do try and use a lot of the resources that we have. And we make 4 different types, and people come out and buy a ticket basically, and then they can eat as much as they want. And it's a lot of fun. We have live music. There's twinkle lights in the trees, and there's a big yard that kids can play in if they want, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, that's really a great idea. I mean, what a way to build community too. And I
Yeah.
thought you were going to say they had to go pull a bucket full of weeds to get their pizza or something like that. You're way nicer than I probably would be. At least you're just charging for it.
Yeah.
That's fun. I love that. Well, I'm wondering, as you have made this transition into flowers, and I'm really intrigued at the fact that you just said a minute ago that you actually, money wise, monetarily, that flowers are outpacing the vegetables at this point.
Yeah.
I have to admit that I've heard this story before, and it
Yep.
doesn't end well for the vegetables. I will say, of course, being the flower podcast, we don't mind that so much, but the vegetable farmers might. So I'm just kind of curious, as you've done that, what has been like a challenge you've had to face transitioning? Because I feel like a lot of times, especially the thing that's screaming out the top of my head right now is pricing. I mean, the way you price vegetables versus flowers is often, really, really, different. And I know for everyone that's listening right now, we're really excited. And I should have said this probably already, but this is going to be a two-part episode. And we're going to go really deep into pricing with Amelia from Rooted Farmers and stuff in our second part. But I wanted to at least kind of hear this backstory of this transition, because I feel like this is hard, because one of the things I hear a lot of times from the flower farmers at markets is that the vegetable farmers who are selling flowers don't often know how to price their flowers and undervalue them, because for them it's just like an extra sale. It's like gravy, so that it doesn't have the value that it should have. So and now that I've said all that, now I'm really curious what you think about all that.
Yeah, that well, and yes. um that's pretty much was our experience, is kind of coming from we had a local friend who grew flowers, and he was telling us that he got $1 a stem for his zinnias, and we were shocked at that time. And it was one of those things where we're like, really, we can do that? And so that
Well, where did you start at? I'm kind of curious before you found that out.
so that was kind of one of those things where if we just cut a random bucket of zinnias, and then we would put them in a bunch and probably sell a bunch for, I don't know, maybe 50 cents a stem, or maybe like a bunch for $3 or something. I mean, seriously, like everything that flower farmers like accuse vegetable growers of doing with their flowers is what we did with those. But I would also say, from a flower grower perspective now, is that they weren't necessarily quality zinnias. Like we were
Mm.
just nobody. I mean, nobody knew what they were doing, so we were just cutting random zinnias, and some of them were probably like flopping over, and some of them were way past their perfect date. And so, so there was that aspect to it as well, and that would be something too, is for myself, and uh, I guess feeling justified in my cheaper prices flowers in the beginning, was I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't feel like I had a quality product, because I didn't have any idea. Like, I mean, I learned really quick as I went, but I didn't know in the beginning what I was doing, or what I was what I was supposed to be providing, like what it was supposed to look like, because I didn't have any floral background, as far as I didn't design, I didn't know florist really at the time. And so it started very very cheap. They're very underpriced for flowers, but that, I also, in some ways, that was, like you said, it's like it was our extra thing, and we were learning. And I definitely have changed a lot and have learned a lot of going, oh wait, these are really valuable. And honestly, there's a lot of labor in flowers, in harvesting flowers and planting flowers, even before you get to any type of design or bouquet work. And that's true for some vegetables, but not true for other vegetables. So to learn how to price them more appropriately, was definitely a big learning curve. And definitely something that I struggled with, because coming from a vegetable background, it was like, oh, I don't want to charge too much for this because I want somebody to eat it. And so then you're like, okay, I don't want to charge too much for these flowers because I want somebody to buy it. And then I'm like, oh wait, I'm completely, and to be fair, we didn't have other flower people at our market either, so it wasn't really undercutting anybody else.
Mm.
But it wasn't a, it's yeah, it was a good learning curve, a good learning opportunity to be like,
Mhm.
oh wait, these actually should be more expensive. Um, and so that's something that even now I interact with other people constantly, trying to figure out what prices should be.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you saying some of the things you just mentioned. For example, you didn't have other flower people there at your market; you were undercutting, and when you don't have other people at your flower market, you really don't know. You have no clue. Like they're selling their bouquet for $15 maybe, and you wouldn't know that if no one else was there. And so, in your defense, I will say that, but I would also say for people listening to this episode that if you're in the same situation and you're trying to figure that out, sometimes maybe visit other markets that do sell flowers. And I know there's other tools and opportunities I know we're going to get to eventually that I think are helpful for that to kind of give you some baseline. I also like to suggest sometimes for being that my background's wholesale, is sometimes visit the wholesalers in your market, see what they're selling flowers for. If they're selling Queen Anne's lace for I hate to even say $12.50 a bunch, then you know that you shouldn't be really selling it for less than that because that's the market value for it. If you're selling to florists or whoever you're selling to, retail like to end customers are different. But anyway, so don't beat yourself up too much about that. I think it's perfectly natural, Kimby. It's but you know what? At least you recognized it, and then you evolved through that and learned, and now you're getting a better price, I guess, right?
Yeah, hopefully. Um, yeah, and we're still, I still feel like, I mean, now I'm selling, I know more of what people expect, as far as, so when we first started, we didn't sell any flowers to florists because I had no idea what I was doing. So as we learned and as we figured it out, we had, you slowly had some florists and some friends who were like, oh wait, we could use these things, or this is what I expect when I want to buy a zinnia. And it's like, oh, okay. Or I had a florist who bought some zinnias from me, and then she was like, okay, well this happened, and I'm like, well they got droopy heads, and I was like, oh, why did they get droopy heads? And so then I learned that, and trying to figure out all of those things, and having some, because we are such a community farm and we are really involved in our community, we have a lot of members in the community who are interested in what we're doing and who are very supportive. And so we've
Mm.
been able to have a lot of back and forth, and learning. So being able to learn, going, oh, okay, this is what they're expecting for a floral, like a florist quality flower. And then being able to produce that, and feeling confident about that. And that has been that has definitely been a learning curve that I'm very happy. I know, not that I have it on 100% of the flowers because I'm still growing new flowers all the time, but just knowing that I'm producing a good thing, and it's a good quality product, and I can charge for it because it's good, and they, most wholesalers can't sell the quality that I can grow.
Mm.
So
That's a great
of
point.
most things, not, there's exceptions, but
I
but
understand.
it's nice having that confidence that it allows me to better price my product and know, okay, this is what it's worth. And then also being able to talk with other growers and with other flower growers, because I had to reach out a little bit because our community didn't really have any, but we do have some, like St. Louis, Kansas City. Actually, a friend that we talked about earlier who's selling gazinias is in Osceola, which is about an hour and a half away. So able to kind of reach out to those people, and as I have, questions on new flowers or questions on prices, I can shoot them a text, and have that, back and forth has been really helpful.
That's great. So I'm just curious because you just mentioned it. Uh, what has been some of I when I preference this is I know a lot of times zinnias and sunflowers are obviously super popular. Marigolds are super popular, or mostly. I'm curious, what other flowers are you growing that are like big, like money makers for you?
Yeah, I mean, we start out in the spring with anemones and ranunculus, and those are huge. Everybody loves ranunculus, and it's an easy sell, wholesale and retail, so that's great. And then I mean, we grow a lot of stuff. Um, so one of my favorites is celosia. I love
Mm.
celosia. I love all of the shapes and the colors and the textures of celosia. That's a big one. Um, I mean, um, I there's yeah, we do straw flowers and amaranth and
Do you grow Lysianthus?
eucalyptus.
I know you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, yeah, I do. We that's been a love-hate relationship.
I understand.
um, but I am starting to grow more lizzies than I have in the past, and so I'm getting a little bit better at that. And then also I'm buying plugs, which I really feel like I'm cheating in some ways because in vegetables we've always started our own things, and so flowers I started with that mindset and then quickly was like, nope, I'm gonna buy plugs for Lizzie's. So
Yeah, I
um,
really that's if there's one, if you're gonna cheat, which I don't think it's cheating because I it's a huge time saver and it just depends on what you're good
absolutely,
at. Some people are really great at starting seeds, but Lizzie's just have so many extra days associated with them, and then they're super. I don't know. Maybe I've not grown them, so I really don't know what I'm talking about. But I know what I've heard is when they're babies, they can be really super delicate, and having that plug that is ready to go and then out of the gate is definitely a benefit. So
yeah,
I don't fault you, and I know there's a lot of people making great money with Lizzie, so it's definitely worth cracking the code on that for you. I know.
yeah,
I'm so now you just mentioned that you sell wholesale, which I'm assuming is to florists also now. Now
yeah.
that you're growing more, how has that gone? How are you doing that?
So so that's an interesting thing. Um, so it just kind of started a little bit as word of mouth, and um, just a little bit here and a little bit there, and then slowly I would have florists contact me when they wanted something,
That's
and
nice.
say they would ask me, hey, what do you have? Mostly event florists, and they would say, hey, what do you have this week, or what do you have in these colors, or what do you think you're going to have, the third week of July. And so there was a lot of back and forth, um, which I enjoyed because I enjoyed working with my florist, but also was a lot of time. And so last year we actually formed a collective, the Missouri Flower Exchange, and a lot of and we've only been doing. We started, I think, it formed in March, so
Oh wow.
it's not even a year old, um, but and I was a big part of being a participant, but I was not at all doing any of the administrative stuff. But our administrators are awesome, and they really got the ball rolling. And so all of that I was constantly communicating with florists, like, and they would show up at all sorts of times at all the time. All that kind of got moved onto the Missouri Flower Exchange and through the co-op and our collective, I should say, and that's been amazing. And so it's all kind of we're set, and it's also great for my florists because now, like, if I don't have that thing they wanted in white, but somebody else does, then they can get, some flowers from me, and they can get some flowers from another grower, and they only have to go to one place to pick it up, and
Right.
it's great.
Now, do they now? So, tell me more about this exchange because is it where is it located? Is it in Springfield or is it somewhere else close
Yeah,
by?
no, it's in Springfield.
Okay,
So we at the last like 2-3 years, we've had an explosion of flower growers, which has actually been really good. And there's been a lot of new people, and as a result, everybody's trying to has been trying to do their own thing, and make their own connections and kind of find their niche and find their market. Um, and we just started a Facebook group. And I say we, Angela Morton, started a Facebook group and of flower growers in the area. And then from that, we were like, we just communicated with each other. And we're like, you know what? Why don't we form a collective? And then there was actually through Rooted was having a scholarship, and so they were
Yeah.
like, well, we should apply for that. And so they did apply for it, and they got that scholarship, and it all happened really fast. So it's been really great. So yeah, we're centered in Springfield. We do have some outlying farmers that work through us, and then I think this year we're actually stretching up a little bit north near Columbia, which is a couple, like 3 hours away.
So let me ask this, because I remember when Rooted came out and they were really trying to help collectives, because their platform works so well at sort of creating that hub for everybody
Yeah.
to kind of work together and team up with. And um, how many farmers do you have, or flower growers do you have that are part of your collective?
I think last year it was 16 or 18. And
Wow, that's
this year
great.
this year I think it's 16 or 15. They just kind of came up with it, and there's some new people, and some of the people, like last year there's a couple people who just were like, well, sure, I'll join, and then they were like, actually, this is not for me, because they didn't anyway. But so then we had a couple people drop and a couple people add, so I think we're right at 16.
That's great. So, what has been one of the biggest things I think that maybe you've learned through this experience of, I mean, because that's a big change going from your markets and juggling all these florists to now having this funnel and platform that you can push your flowers through under this, the Missouri Flower Exchange umbrella.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a huge change, and it's been a great change. It's Yeah, one of the things that, from a market perspective, that was interesting for me was we had a flower truck in the area who was focused on local flowers, and so she bought a lot of flowers from me.
Oh, so
And
she
then
didn't
she just
grow. I'm sorry to interrupt. She didn't grow. She just retailed the flowers out of a truck.
Yes,
Okay. All
yes,
right.
she had a cool little like Volkswagen truck thing, and she had converted it. It was really
Sure.
cool. But so she would buy local flowers. She did end up growing a little bit herself, but not very much. And then she ended up so she was a huge market for me. She ended up deciding to move, and she sold her business, and the person she sold it to wasn't using the same business model. So she didn't buy anything from me anymore. So, but basically that corresponded with starting the Missouri Flower Exchange. And so that what I sold through Missouri Flower Exchange completely actually eclipsed what I was selling to that one grower, which was really helpful for me, because that was like my wholesale market. So it was a great thing, and I had a lot more people that I was interacting with from a florist perspective, as far as my product was getting into their stores, than previously, and I had less work because I didn't have to talk to everybody. Not that I mind talking to everybody, but I
Well,
didn't
it's a
have to like
lot.
coordinate that. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially when I'm still growing vegetables and still managing CSAs and all these other things is hard to, yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot
No,
to juggle.
well, people don't realize that. I mean, when marketing your flowers and delivering your flowers and taking those phone calls and juggling, okay, this person wants this shade of pink and this person wants this darker shade of pink. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot to juggle. And then there's the timing of cut stage, delivery, cooler. I mean, it is a lot. And I think that's great though that this is, I mean, this model I think is really what's going to revolutionize the whole flower industry in the US, because it's creating vehicles for people like you to move your flowers.
Yeah.
And because you can harness the power of your other farmers, it's like together you guys are really um, a great resource for florists and other people. So
Yeah, yeah. No, it's been really great. It's I mean, we had a couple florists who were really dedicated to buying local, and they would come to me and they would buy something, and then they would go to another farm and they would buy something, and then they would meet somebody else at a drop off location about, and like, they would spend their entire day
yeah,
picking up flowers. And I mean, this is so much better because it's like they can see all the pictures, so they know what everybody has. They can order one thing, they can go to one place, they can pick it up. It's been wonderful.
yeah. So I know just because of my own experience with Rooted that they can go online for everybody individually, place an order, then they pick it up. Is that the way that works?
Yeah, so for us, we have everybody ordering. Yeah, they can order individually, as long as, and then it all goes to one place to get picked up on a certain day. So we like take everything on a Tuesday, and all the florists come on Wednesday and pick it up
Oh, okay.
at a central location.
Now, do people bring extra product for people who, you know, sort of have that spontaneous impulse buy?
Yeah, so how we've done it is we have a market basically, and so people who have pre-ordered will come and pick up their pre-order, and then if I have extras of whatever, then I'll send that as well. And so, and everybody else will. And so what ends up happening is we have like basically a flower market every Wednesday. And so the people who are pre-ordering also know that. So they'll come and they'll pick up their pre-order of the stuff they really want, and then they'll also see the other things. Then so they'll impulse buy. And we also have people just show up
Mm.
who didn't pre-order at all and are just kind of getting whatever's there that works for what they want. So it was a fun model.
So, being that your background began as a vegetable farmer, I'm sure because you had beautiful flowers, they embraced you warm, wholeheartedly. But I'm curious, with your background being that, like, what was some of the big things you learned from being now you got some new buds that are, no pun intended, meaning friends. Sorry, just making sure I'm being clear that now you have some new friends that are flower farmers and I bet you were like a kid in a candy store picking their brains and everything else. I'm just curious what were some of the things you learned from them right off the bat?
Well, so it's kind of interesting. I mean, yes, have a lot of flower farmers now, but most, like, I've been growing flowers longer than most of them have. So
Wow. Yeah.
it actually was kind of more the other way. But I mean, at the same time, I totally am learning things from them as well. I think the biggest thing that I really respect of my fellow farmers is that, they, like, I kind of mentioned this before, but like they're having to hit the ground running with flowers and only flowers, and they've had to figure out the pricing, and they've had to figure out the markets, and they had to figure out the growing all at the same time.
Mm.
And they're amazing. Like, they do a really good job. So there's a lot of things that I'm like, so how are you pricing this? Because I didn't do that, or I don't have experience in that flower or in that way of arranging or whatever. And so it's, yeah, so that's been really helpful.
Not bad. Do you feel like now because of the exchange, like are you seeing like trends for, as far as colors go, or maybe now you're kind of broadening your palette, or maybe dropping some colors and picking up others? I mean, is that influence what you're doing for this year?
So that's an interesting question. So basically, I mean, as most of our sales in the past have been farmers market sales, and a lot of times flowers at market are bright and colorful and wild and crazy, and that tends, or at least for us, and that tends to be what sells because that's what attracts the attention, and people see those bright things and they're like, oh, I want that bright thing in my, in my on my dining room table or in my kitchen or whatever. Whereas event flowers tend to be a lot more muted, and I'm not an expert at this, but basically, whites and pinks and pastels and just
Right.
sometimes, a lot more muted, a lot more, subtle. and so um how I've dealt with that is that I just grow all sorts of things. I like to grow lots of mixes, color mixes, and just a bunch of different things. And then I cut, because basically what I'm not selling wholesale, I am taking to market and making it into bouquets and selling it that way. So I don't have a lot to lose necessarily as far as not being able to use something. This year I'm actually trying to focus a little bit more on the like selling through the collective, and so selling more wholesale. So I am paying a lot more attention to color. It's a little bit hard because everybody wants something different every time, so you never
Right.
quite know
That's the truth.
what you're gonna need.
That's true. And plus, then there's like the things you like, like, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I have been paying a lot more attention to color this year, and so I'm
Uh-huh.
trying to like actually, instead of growing a mix of zinnias, I'm actually just growing like certain colors of zinnias
Sure.
this year, that kind of stuff. So that's been kind of adjusting my focus a little bit. Um, Always trying to grow more white because anyway, I've never grown a lot of white because the bugs love it, and so I'm
I
just
know.
like,
Yeah.
but everybody wants white, so I'm trying to grow some more
No,
of that.
I agree. And the one year that we grew a lot of flowers with a lot of vegetables, we noticed that too. The green flowers, the white flowers. I mean, they have the mark of death on them, and they just every. I mean, in a way, it's kind of good because it draws insects from other things, but it's frustrating when you're trying to make that bride happy in July or whenever. And yeah,
Yeah.
I get it. I do understand. Well, that's interesting because I often wonder that. And a lot of times people don't appreciate, so I'm glad you said this, the nuance between selling at a market and selling wholesale, because those markets, those bright colors are what I always call the 55-mile-an-hour colors. The color when you're driving 55 miles an hour, it catches your eye, and it's like it draws you in. And a lot of times those aren't the same flowers you see walking down an aisle in a wedding. And
Yeah.
yeah, and so it depends on how you're selling your flowers and maybe what you choose to grow. So I think that's really awesome. Well, I've got to ask this question before we wrap up this part, because I always ask this question and I didn't warn you about this, so I'm sorry. But we always ask like an advice question, like for new growers, or maybe it's a piece of advice that somebody has given you over the years that just really resonated with you. I'm just curious if you have that one piece of advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with.
Mm. Um, I guess the thing for me would be that I've enjoyed and taken to heart is that I'm constantly tweaking and experimenting and trying new things. So if and so that would be my piece of advice, is to always try new things, try a different flower, try a different way of growing it, try a different, you know, season, not maybe a season, but a different timing or whatever. If something you didn't like, just to kind of figure out like, well, do I not like it because it doesn't grow well for me, or did I plant it in the wrong time or
Hmm.
whatever. So just constantly experimenting and kind of learning from that.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because I think a lot of times people, well, and I've shared this story recently, so I hesitate to do it again. But back when I started growing flowers in North Georgia, it was unheard of to grow ranunculus and anemones. And now we're doing it like crazy because we figured out when to plant it, when not to plant it, those kinds of things, and it's so doable. And things evolve, things change, and you can adapt to your climate. Just don't give up. And sometimes you do have to wave the white flag and say, okay, yeah, there's just not possible. But I think overall, I think it's totally something that you may just have to tweak. Maybe you planted a month earlier or a month later, or whatever your situation might be. But I can appreciate that, and I'm glad you said that. Now, okay, so I'm super thrilled that now we are going to put this recording on pause, and we are going to actually go a lot deeper into pricing with Amelia from Rooted Farmers, because I want They've got some new information, new trends reports, new techniques, and I know this is some of the product that you use, Kimby, and I really kind of want to dig deep into this, but we'll come back on part two for that. And Kimby, thank you so much for being on the Flower Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.